Alright, this is a build guide, a build showcase for 3.13 Sire of Shards Ball Lightning Pathfinder. Character name is called Timisha is coming for you. Shout out to Timisha Iman from season 13 of RuPaul's Drag Race. Alright, this build stacks negative lightning resistances on top of spell damage, and the reason why we're stacking negative lightning resistances is because Doryani prototype, which makes enemies have the same lightning resistance as you. And so lightning resistance, when it's basically a more multiplier. So then with negative 161% lightning res, we have 161% more damage. We're also in a way stacking spell damage by using Indigon Helm. Whenever we spend mana, we start building up and ramping up spell damage. So if you can see over here my stats, it looks a little scary because it says my fire resistances, fire, cold, and lightning resistances are negative. We want the lightning to be negative, and the way we're going to mitigate the fire and the cold is through flask use. And so when those flasks are up, we are going to be just fine with the resistances. And so we also want a bit of cold and fire resistance on our gear. So how it works again is we are using Sire Shards with Ball Lightning, and whenever we cast Ball Lightning, it's going to fire off in a Nova in a circle, and we're going to do it with Cyclone cast while channeling, and so that just makes it really easy. We just cyclone around and ball lightnings fly out of us. We're using that with slower projectiles, add lightning, and Ellie focus. In the armor piece here, Doryani prototype, again, we are using this because it says negative, and nearby enemies have lightning resistance equal to yours. So if we have negative, they also have negative. And so we had to find a way to mitigate that lightning damage that we're going to be taking. 50% of our lightning damage is going to be mitigated through this talisman that has the implicit 50% of damage. Lightning damage is taken as cold damage instead. And the other way we're going to do that is through using Glorious Vanity Jewel on the passive tree, and that's going to make it so 50% of our elemental damage is taken as chaos damage, and we also get extra chaos damage because of that. When I pop my chaos flask, my chaos resistance bumps up to 81%, and so we are safe from really safe from a lot of elemental damage and chaos damage because of the flask effect, and because we're using that Glorious Vanity with the keystone that gives us 5% max chaos res, and makes so again that 50% of our elemental damage is taken as chaos. So yeah, that's how we're mitigating all that lightning damage that we take. I have played versions before where you can stack armor instead, and so that you can use your armor rating to mitigate that lightning damage, but we kind of had a workaround this time. So in my chest piece, I have Plague Bearer that is attached to Arcane Surge, increased area of effect, increased duration, and Conk effect. And this is not a poison build. We are simply using Plague Bearer to spend mana. Plague Bearer has a 0.5 second cooldown, and when we start using it, we're just using it to spend mana because it's an instant skill and we don't need to stop and use it, and so we can keep we can keep channeling Cyclone while using Plague Bearer. And again, we're just using Plague Bearer to spend mana. And the reason why we want to spend a lot of mana is because we're using Indigon Helm, and with Indigon Helm, you start stacking up spell damage for every 200 mana that you've spent recently. And also, as you spend mana, you will also, skills will start to cost more mana, so it'll ramp up that spell damage for you. And in my helm, I'm just using Dash, Second Wind, Righteous Fire, Arcane Cloak. We're using Wrath Aura in Essence Worm because we don't want to reserve mana, so this is the only aura we're using. And and I just have some rare gloves, some elusive boots. I just got a curse set up with Vortex in my gloves. Don't know what else to add, so I added Bone Chill just for extra chill effect. You could also just put Calling Strike here instead. Just a life and res belt. Again, you want to avoid lightning res as much as possible. And then a life res elusive boots. You could also go Tailwind or both. And here I just have a cast when damage taken set up with the Mortal Call, Blade Blast, and Cold Snap. And what Cold Snap does is it creates Chilling Ground, and if enemies die in that Chilling Ground, it gives us a chance to get a Frenzy Charge, which is great for ultimatums because you're killing enemies in an area, in a small area as it is, so you're going to proc Cold Snap all the time, so you're going to have almost 100% uptime with Frenzy Charges in ultimatums. The only downside of using Mortal Call with cast when damage taken is when that procs, we can't use our Arcane Cloak. An Arcane Cloak is a guard skill that spends mana to create a shield, like a 3-second shield for you, but and also gives you extra lightning damage. But I'm using Mortal Call here in case too, because sometimes you get hit really hard. Blade Blast just for the unnerved for more damage, and you're also using Inventor's Gamble. I spent about like almost 3 exalts for this Inventor's Gamble. These rings are really interesting because they can have a lot of negative and positive rolls. It really is a gamble because you can get decreased quantity or increased quantity or decreased rarity or increased rarity. You could have positive or negative resistances, and the life roll is such a big mess too. I happen to get this one with 40 life, max quant roll, fire cold res, and negative lightning res. Again, we want that negative lightning res, okay, to stack more damage on enemies. So I'll show you my passive tree. Oh, let's talk flasks real quick. You want an enduring flask of mana because once you start spending mana for skills, this is going to basically keep your mana up. And the other thing is we can use Righteous Fire because of this mana. So if I proc Righteous Fire, you'll see that my life and mana just start burning away. But if I use my flask, it just has that uptime. And so, yeah, that's really nice. We're using a Amethyst Flask for Chaos Res. Dying Sun, this is really about the Fire Res. We could just use a regular Ruby Flask, but we're using Dying Sun. And the nice thing about Dying Sun is we also get extra projectiles, Taste to Hate, and we're just using this purely for defense. Number 1 for the cold res, number 2 because 20% of physical damage from hits taken is cold damage during flash effect, and because we have increased flash effect, I believe that 20% physical damage that's converted to cold actually turns out to be like 35 or 36 or something like that. So this is how we're mitigating a lot of damage, is simply through using Taste to Hate and just a Quicksilver Flask. Yeah, so again, I'm going to show you how I'm stacking all of the negative lightning resistances, and that's through the tree. So first of all, we want to make sure that we don't really have any lightning resistance from our gear. And so what we're doing is we're stacking Thread of Hopes with 20%, minus 20% to all lightning resistance, elemental resistances. And right now I have 5 of these jewels, so that's already minus 100%. Again, you have to find a way to then get enough cold and fire res, and like I said, we're doing that through using flasks. Okay, so this tree looks a bit janky, but really it's just about getting as many Thread of Hopes as we can into the tree. Okay, and for the cluster jewels, we're using, I just bought this cluster jewel because it has a bunch of chaos res, and we needed to have a good amount of chaos res to also mitigate a bunch of elemental damage. And this one just happened to have supercharge. We are non-crit, and so it says here lightning damage with non-crit strikes is lucky. That means all lightning damage is rolled twice, and since lightning damage has such a huge range, when it's lucky, it will take the larger of the 2 numbers. We just have some flask medium clusters here. This one tends to be pretty expensive. This Liquid Inspiration does Still Perfection one. I think those usually go for about 2 to 3x, just because these Liquid Inspiration is pretty hard to roll on a medium cluster. We are going dodge, and so that's how we're mitigating some of our incoming hits as well. We are trying to pick up as much mana effect on, or flask effect on the tree. We pick up Supreme Ego, which makes our Wrath Aura give us more lightning spell damage. Again, we are using Divine Flesh from the Glorious Vanity Jewel, which makes half of our elemental damage taken as chaos. And again, that's how we mitigate all that lightning resistance that we have, low light resistance that we have. I just also happened to get a +1 maximum chaos res through the Glorious Vanity notable here with a 14 chaos res. The Agnostic, this is how we're staying alive, really. When not on full life, 20% of mana is sacrificed per second to recover that much life. And so that's why we don't have a life flask. Basically, our mana flask is our life and mana flask in a way. We did pick up Mind Over Matter since we're not reserving mana. This also gives us a much larger life pool. Elemental Overload since we're non-crit. And over here, I just have a large cluster that had just a few good notables and another flask, a flask medium cluster here. Sorry, my dog is being fussy. And yeah, for the Ascendancy, we chose Pathfinder because we're basically surviving off flasks. Started by going with Nature's Boon for the basically 100% uptime on flasks because you've recharged flasks. Then we went for Master Alchemist, which gives us freeze, shock, and ignite immunity, or it gives us elemental ailment immunity, rather. Nature's Adrenaline, which gives us more movement speed. We don't really care about the attack speed. And we picked up Master Surgeon. You might be wondering why we picked up Master Surgeon instead of Veteran's Warrior, because it says here Veteran's Warrior damage penetrates 10% elemental resistances. That does nothing for us because we can't penetrate more elemental resistances than we are already applying by using Doryani's prototype. And so we can't stack more lightning resistance or more negative elemental resistance onto enemies than what we have. And so this keystone on the Pathfinder tree does nothing for us. And we're also not applying elemental ailments because we're using elemental focus on our ball lightning because it's just the highest amount of damage. And the other thing is ball lightning is not gonna, if you don't use Ellie focus, yeah, you can apply shock, but the shock amount you're gonna get from ball lightning is not going to be that great because ball lightning is not about one big hit, and shock procs, works best if you have a big lightning hit. Ball lightning hits quickly and it hits multiple times, and so those hits are small, and so the shock amount you're going to get is not great. And so this notable basically does nothing for us, and that's why we went with Master Surgeon instead, which gives us bleed immunity and flask life on flaskies. And the other great thing is flash charge when you deal a crit strike. And we don't deal crit strikes that often, but it helps. It comes in really handy when you're fighting bosses to keep your flask uptime, because you will occasionally get crit strikes, and it's just enough to refill your flasks before you need to use them again. And so we basically have 100% uptime on flasks. This is a fun build to play. It's pretty tanky. I've been able to do Awakener 5 so far. That's about as far as I am. I've done Breaches. I've done, I hardly ever die in ultimatums. I can run an ultimatum all the way to the end. And so, and in a way, almost face tank all ultimatums too. So it's been great. It's been a fun build to play. Spin to win. Stick around for some footage of some more of this build in play. So, and the Link to the path of building should be in the description. Feel free to leave questions in the comments, and thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy trying out this build. Bye!